Hi, friend. I am thrilled to have the legendary Ashton Applewhite on the podcast today. You likely know Ashton from her viral video with Jane Fonda, in which they discuss adding 7 years to your life. Today, we talk about that, plus the insidiousness of ageism, especially for women, and the ways that these beliefs quietly shape everything from our self worth to our relationships. If you're new here, you might not know that some episodes back, I discussed how I reversed my heart disease by following a whole food plant based diet. After the podcast, head over to my website, wellelephant.com, to download my free whole food plant based cookbook to start exploring how you can transform your health. While you're there, check out my online course, Ace Plant Based Eating, if you're really ready to reverse disease like I did. Finally, please comment on social media, the podcast, YouTube, wherever you find Age Like a Badass Mother, and let me know what topics you'd like to see covered. I truly listen to everything that you have to say. I value your opinion, and I appreciate you immensely. Now, here is Ashton Applewhite. Hi, friend. I'm Lauren Bernick, and I'm flipping the script about growing older. From rebels and rule breakers to wellness warriors and wise women, my guests have been influencers since before that was even a thing, and we're not even close to finished. Welcome to Age Like a Badass Mother. An internationally recognized expert on ageism, Ashton Applewhite is the author of This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism, and co-founder of the Old School Hub. She speaks widely at venues that have included the United Nations and the TED Main Stage, and is at the forefront of the emerging movement to raise awareness of ageism and make age a criterion for diversity. In 2022, the United Nations named Ashton one of the Healthy Aging 50 leaders transforming the world to be a better place to grow older. So I cannot think of a better person to talk about aging to Ashton Applewhite. Welcome, Ashton.
Thank you, Lauren. Good to be here.
And this is Ashton's book for anybody who's watching on YouTube. I'm just holding it up. This Chair Rocks.
Fun to read, I promise.
It's what?
Fun to read.
You know what? It was a really interesting read. What did you do before you were an advocate for aging?
That's always, you never get a satisfying answer because if you look at my bio on my website, I have never had a clear plan for what I wanted to do. I never knew what to major in college. I never wanted to be a writer. I'm an introvert. So the fact that I'm now a public figure seems absurd. But so I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I will tell you that I really love doing this. I've been at it now for about 20 years. And if you had told me 20 years ago I'd be fascinated by aging, I would have said, ooh, why do I want to think about something sad that old people do? And of course, I've learned so much, among them the fact that we are aging from the minute we're born, right? So people talk about aging parents, aging celebrities. Your newborn is aging. And it touches on every aspect of being human, every domain of knowledge, and it's also really unexamined. So there's so much like unbroken ground, so many new ideas available for everyone.
And what made you first become aware of ageism?
I started getting old.
Yes, same.
And I don't think that's just, and I was apprehensive about it, and I think I don't have a deeply researched or philosophical answer on this, but I think it's really hard to imagine getting old. And part of that is because we live in an ageist culture that says everything's going to go to hell and be awful. But part of it, I think, is just human. We age slowly. I mean, as a kid, why would you sit in a chair when you could run around, right? And it's hard to imagine. But in my mid 50s, I probably had that look in the mirror moment. I'm like, oh, it is happening to me too, like every other human, surprise. And being nerdy, I sort of go at the thing that frightens me, and that's my nature. And I started researching longevity and interviewing people over 80, and learned in a matter of months, if not weeks, the facts that I started my TED Talk out with a decade later, that the fears are real. You're not going to have me saying, just cheer up or eat a lot of kale and it's all going to be great. There are real things, real challenges to aging made much harder by the society in which we age. That's my self-appointed mission, is to get people to think how the culture in which we age shapes our aging. But I just realized, like, most of what I thought I knew about later life was flat out wrong or not nuanced enough. And I became obsessed with why we only hear the negative side of the story. And I was off and running.
Yeah, you know what? That's very similar to my story.
Tell me.
I was in my mid 50s when I started this podcast because I was in my mid 50s. Not
Yeah.
just that, but like I've talked about this on the podcast before. Like I reversed my heart disease by following a whole food plant-based diet. The doctor told me, "No, you can't reverse your disease." And I did. And then it just got me thinking, like, what other things have I been told that are just bullshit? And
I just accepted, never thought to
right,
question,
don't question it. The doctor says you have to take a statin and you have to
especially as a woman.
Mhm.
And especially to a figure in authority like a doctor.
Mhm. Yes, and I've told this story too that after about 6 years on this diet, I wanted to get confirmation that I had reverse disease, so I had to get a referral to go to a cardiologist to get all this testing done. And I didn't have a primary care physician. So I walk into this new place. The doctor walks in with her clipboard. I swear to God, and I'm sure you believe this, she doesn't even look up at me. She's looking at the clipboard. She's like, "Okay, you're 52 years old. What are you here for? You want your statin again, or you need your blood pressure medicine?" Or I was like,
I'm
"Look at
sorry.
me. Look up at me."
Really? And good doctors tell so much from just looking. They have like X-ray
Uh-huh.
vision. They can tell so much about you from just looking at you. I think it's a thought experiment in the book, it's really important to our age is important, significant component of our identity and a component of our medical profile.
Right.
However, I would love it to be on page 2.
Mhm.
Same with dating profiles. I
Right.
think you should say how old you are, but I don't, because, and this is no judgment, honestly, the minute we have a number, all sorts of assumptions about that person click into place. It's one of the ways we use, like where someone's from and whether they speak your language or whether they're a
Right.
vegetarian, that we use to socially locate people. And age
Yes.
is one of those factors. And it's important not to pretend, or, I think not to say, oh, age is just a number, or not to be embarrassed to say our age. But it's also important, and it's not a paradox, but it's a delicate balance, to push back
Uh-huh.
against the idea that that number tells you all that much about me.
Yeah.
And a corollary to that, if I may,
Yes.
is that the longer we live, the more different from one another we become. Each of us ages at different rates, socially, biologically, physically. So the older the person, the less that your chronological age says about you. You could be operating great in two spheres and have a chronic illness.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you're not in the world in interesting ways, for example. So don't let we're all guilty of it. We love to make assumptions. We love to categorize. Don't get me started on generational labels, which are sort of the stereotype that everyone born sort of roughly around the same time everywhere is the same. It's
Yeah.
absurd.
So is that ageism to talk about generations? Because I didn't even realize that. Because I
Well, if the term is like, I mean, this is one of my many private crusades, or hopefully public crusades, and no judgment. I mean, language is a moving target. I am not here. I'm not the language police. I'm not the what you should wear or say police. But I am really not a fan of generational stereotypes, because they are based on the assumption that everyone around the same age, is similar in fundamental ways. Clearly, that's absurd. I mean, just on the
yeah.
face of it, imagine all the 73-year-olds who, in Ghana and London and Santiago, that are not a whole lot like me. But people love to categorize. We are being ageist anytime we make an assumption
Mm.
about someone on the basis of how old we think they are. And generational labels are used for that. And humans love to categorize, and it's a really hard habit to break. But if I were the boss of the world, the word generation would be struck by lightning. anytime it was used, except there's only one agreed upon meaning. Your child is another generation from you, and your parents are another generation. Other than that, there's no scientifically agreed meaning for the term. It can be as little as 6 years or as many as 20. So it's not scientifically accurate. And it does two things. It inherently reinforces age stereotypes because it is a generalization about age, and also it lays the groundwork for us versus them framing. Oh, those greedy boomers, oh, those lazy millennials, etc., etc. And that is the root of all evil.
Yeah, I agree with you about that, but I just do feel like I identify with I'm Generation X. Now I'm like scared to say this, but I feel like I do.
I'm glad I've got you on the run already.
You do. I've been terrified to interview you, but thrilled and
I
terrified.
hope not.
And I
I
want
hope not.
no, I want to learn. I mean, obviously I wouldn't have had you here, but I mean, I do
But
feel like
but we all are learning.
right.
I've used, and plus, I mean, I'm not God. You may disagree with me. But I mean, this is if I ever write another book, which I hope the hell I'd never do because it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's going to be all I have is the title.
What is it?
I've always come up with the title miserably months after writing the damn thing. But in this one, I have the title, and it is Things I Used to Say.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And I used to say generations all the time, and now I don't for political reasons that are important to me. You don't have to think like I think.
Yeah.
I appreciate you listening to what I have to say and considering, thinking differently.
Yeah.
That's a big
I
ask.
just feel like for people I know who are around my age, that we did have like so many similar cultural touch points. I mean, everybody has that with people
No,
around
but
their age and
we
right?
do. We do. My dad was shaped by the Great
Right.
Depression, living through the Depression and World War II. So we do have a whole set of cultural and historic references that we share with people born the same time.
Right.
But we're probably honestly talking, in your and my case, about like middle class white girls
Yes.
in
Right.
the United States. That was not the experience of pick a you know lower or higher socioeconomic status person
Mm.
living somewhere in the majority world who doesn't speak English or whatever.
Right.
There is much more diversity within any group than age group, and it's also true in
Right.
racial categories and ethnic
Right.
categories. There's more variation within any circle in that diagram than there is between that circle and that circle.
Right.
There's so much
You're
variation.
right.
So that's why assumptions
Yes.
are just never, I mean, there's a great a colleague of mine, gerontologist Tracy Gendron, did this super helpful ageism flowchart. Has a box at the top that says, "Is age a factor in what I'm about to say or do?" with a yes and a no.
Right.
And if the answer is no, hooray, it is an ageist. And then if it's yes, it is a factor in what I'm about to say or do. The only other box is, am I making an assumption or judgment
Yes.
based on it?
You
And if it's no, then it's not ageist,
right, right. The assumptions.
right? I mean, before you started the recording, I asked about the age of an eminent social scientist in this field, and I wondered what age she was.
Right.
I don't think that was ageist of me, although God knows I'm not perfect, because I was just curious. I wanted a sense. I came on her research early on
We're talking about
and
Dr.
had no
Ellen Langer. She's been on the
Ellen
show
Langer's
before.
eminent research. Yeah, thank you. And I was just curious whether she, had, because I started this later in life, and I was curious as to whether she was older and younger than I am to sort of locate her in time.
Right.
But I don't think I made an assumption about whether she was competent or incompetent on the basis of what I learned.
Correct. And I asked you that because I think then you said your age. And I asked you, is it
It's a great question.
ageist to ask somebody's age? And how
You
old
know,
are you?
it's
You
complicated. I
said, I
mean,
think you said 73.
I will be 73 in 2
Oh,
weeks.
happy birthday.
Um, it's ageist in a job interview
Yes, of
because
course.
I should be judged in a job interview for whether I have the skills for the job, not how old I happen to
Right.
be. Um, these are complicated questions. In a dating profile or on a date,
Yes.
honestly, if you want to start a family, even then, even then I could make a case. Women are now able to prolong our reproductive capacity into our 50s.
Right.
But if you want to, start a family and settle down, you're more likely to do that in the first half of life. But even then, It's like with the minute we have an age, though, and me too, I'm not exempting myself here, a whole set of assumptions do click into place. And if we can keep those assumptions at bay, and it's the same with assumptions about ethnicity or
Yes.
sexual orientations, and
Yes.
just try, which is really hard, to look at the person and just look at who they
Who they
are,
are.
what's coming out of their mouth, what's on their bookshelves, or
Yes.
whether they have bookshelves, and try and figure out whether you have something in common with them or something you'd like to do together or not, instead of what we look like and
Yeah.
instead of things about ourselves that we cannot change.
Yes. You actually have something on your website that I've copied some of them, to ask yourself if you're being ageist, and
Mm,
it's like a little quiz you could take, and some of the things are, and you guys who are listening can see if you've ever done any of this, uh, I called an older adult youngster once thinking it was a compliment. That's, ageist. I told someone you look great for your age thinking it was a compliment. I joked with a friend about a senior moment when they forgot something. I dismissed an older relative's opinion about a current event by saying that's just because you're from a different time.
mm.
Let's see, I felt surprised when an older adult used social media fluently, thinking it wasn't their thing. There's a bunch of them, but I've probably made that ageist.
We all have.
And I
We
hate
all
that.
have.
I love that we're
What?
learning this now
Well, I
or
mean,
thinking about it.
my favorite comment to get from my book, which usually is something that comes along pretty early, is holy crap, I had no idea from the reader how ageist I
Yes.
was and how I participated in this. But let me say two things. First of all, we live in a culture that barrages us with negative messages. Of course we absorb it. It's like the thing that girls aren't good at math.
Right.
Countries where there isn't that myth, girls do better on math tests because there isn't a cultural
Mm.
expectation that you're going to be dumber than boys on math.
Yeah.
We are all shaped by the cultures in which we live. So no judgment at all. And I will say that, like you, I hate that. None of us wants to admit to being biased. But that first step, which you have already taken, and thank you for being so open and vulnerable about it on your show, and tell me if this is not the case. It's like letting a genie out of the bottle. The minute you are brave enough to see it in yourself, which is not fun, it like, or lifts a veil, maybe that's a better metaphor, and suddenly you start seeing it in the culture, you start seeing it in billboards, you start hearing it on TV, and you're like, oh, it's not that I am this terribly flawed human being, it's that it is embedded
Yes.
in the culture. It is a social and economic problem, and that means we can come together and do something about it.
Yes.
That's what consciousness racing does.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I love having these conversations, because I think we are all trying to do better. Well, hopefully we are.
Hopefully,
Not
yeah, and it's liberating.
It is.
If you're genuinely curious, I mean, to me, it's like, oh, I mean, and I really mean that it gets more interesting all the time because I keep realizing I don't say certain things like that I used to say. I mean, this gets said a lot still, ageism is the only acceptable prejudice. They're all still too damn
Oh
acceptable,
yeah.
and I don't say that anymore. But I don't jump on the throat of people who do say that. We are constantly revising how we think about things on the basis of new things we've come
Yeah.
across.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So many things. I feel like, well, you talked about in the book that two things, like that Americans over 50 control 70% of the disposable income, but that marketers ignore us. So I want to know why about that, and also the beauty industry. What it's like $300 billion, and you say you can't make money off satisfaction, and so I mean
That would be it.
yeah. I guess I
Um,
answered my own question.
well, I mean, part of
Or
the trick about selling things, I'll talk about like the older women in particular. We buy more clothes, we buy more household goods, we control more household shopping decisions typically than our mates if we are in heterosexual relationships. Um, And yet, because of internalized bias, and we all have internalized bias, that's what you're talking
Mhm.
about, um, means that we are reluctant to identify as old
Mm.
or older. And you can see a huge tell, and I see it all the time, even in people who work in aging services, who do work with older people morning, noon, and night, and they are north of, definitely north of midlife. And they are still talking about these older people as them. not
Right.
us.
Right. Right.
They be us, let me tell you.
Yes. Yeah.
But women, if you can't get over that hump, and it's not easy because we live in a culture that is constantly saying younger is better. That's why we're supposed to be complimented by being called a young lady. And that is a dead
God, I
giveaway
hate
that
that.
it's ageist, if it's a stereotype or if it's a judgment.
Mm.
And anything that says younger is better, either expressly or by calling itself anti-aging, is,
Yes.
the essence of ageism. So if women are reluctant to identify as older, it's very hard for marketers to sell us stuff for older women because we're like, no, that's not me. I'll go see what's at Forever 21 or whatever. Speaking of ageist names of stores, uh, so part of the work is ours to do,
Yes.
and it's a big ask. I mean, we the beauty industry. I mean, it's very depressing to see these really young girls on TikTok doing wrinkle prevention stuff. I recommend a blogger on beauty culture named Jessica DeFino, uh, and she talks about culture. And she had a picture of some kind of skincare products modeled to made to look like crayons for elementary school
What?
age girls.
What's her name? I
Girls,
want to write it down. Jessica
Jessica DEFINO.
DFINO. Okay,
Yeah,
Defino.
she's just so sharp on how these norms, haha, no such
Uh
thing,
huh.
are reinforced and created, and now and about how women are, and all the paradoxes of, I mean, trends in which you're supposed to look natural by putting in enormous effort
Right.
to have made to look like you have not made any effort, which is all part of women's labor, which is part of capitalism, blah, 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 blah. She's fascinating.
Yeah, I'll be interested. I'd maybe have her on the podcast. You, in your book, you kind of, I thought this was fascinating. I'm just reading from the book now. Barbara McDonald pointed out that young women's alienation from older women's and dread at becoming like them was the result of social forces. Your power as a young woman is measured by the distance you can keep between you and older women, she wrote with brutal frankness.
So sad, right?
Yes, that was,
Yeah.
wow.
And when, like, if I go hang out with my younger friends, does it make me, quote unquote, look old?
Uh-huh.
That, I mean, we just, I can't even, it's so important to have friends of all ages.
Yes.
And it's so important, especially for older and younger women, to hang out, because otherwise, I mean, for intuitively obvious reasons, but I think we live in a very age segregated
Yeah,
society. I think the US is the most age
it
segregated.
is.
And we olders forget how hard it is to be young,
Yes.
you know, right?
I
And
wouldn't
we're
wanna be
caught up
young
in
again.
envy.
No way.
No way. I don't know anyone who actually wants to go
No.
back to
They
the
wanna
youth.
look young because 'cause we're
Right. But
conditioned for
you
that, but
I ask that question and people go,
hell no.
their face lights up, and then they're like, "Oh, wait." I'm like, "Yeah, you do not get to take your present day smarts and experience back."
Uh-huh.
No one wants to go back to their youth because it's really, really hard. And I think younger women live in fear of aging and losing their value. And if they hung out with older women, they would see the ways in which aging is liberating, how we come to know ourselves better, how we come to be able to say more what we want and need, whether it's in bed or in the
Yeah.
office. And that, if, so the more we can support each other through this,
Yes.
the more, that it's women who are leading the movement, and we always will because we have more at stake.
Absolutely. And I should have asked you this when you brought it up, but we got sidetracked. But you talked about you interviewed a lot of 80-year-olds. I have as well. But what did you learn from them that they loved
I
about
learned how
aging?
different they were from each other.
Yeah.
They were just completely different. I mean, I will admit to it started out inspired by my mother-in-law, who was in her 90s. She and her husband were booksellers, and they said, "Why don't you write about something people ask us all the time? When are you going to retire?"
Oh,
That's ageist because it's making an assumption.
right.
They're really old. They should be retired.
Right.
Okay? That's what makes that question ageist. Um, and so the project began as a blog called "So When Are You Gonna Retire.com." And I interviewed people over 80 who work. In hindsight, this was because it was less scary. It was a safe way to speak, to dip my foot into a river that was frightening for real reasons. Are that there's only two inevitable bad things about getting older, but they are real. People you've known all your life are going to die, and some part of your body is going to fall apart. And you do move, of course, closer to death. So talking to older people who were still, that's usually an ageist tell also, still in the world in the way they had been and being conventionally economically productive and visible was a way for me to get my feet wet. But from the very beginning, I will say I had a queasy feeling that I wasn't really dealing with the full picture, which now, 15 years later, I would say it was very ableist, meaning these are people that were ableism is discrimination and stereotyping around physical or cognitive capacity, and all these people were, had not lost that.
Mm-hmm.
And it also is very conventional in that they were, under capitalism, if you don't make money, you are considered a burden. Right?
Yes.
If you're a woman and you are not busy, keeping busy, I mean, that has been active in culture since the dawn of patriarchy.
Yes.
You're not allowed to just sit on your ass,
No.
right? If you, assuming you can afford to. So there's
Right.
all these deeply embedded cultural values. And I did realize pretty soon that I could not just focus on successful agers is one of my least favorite terms. And as I came to understand and wrote in the book, if you wake up in the morning, you are aging successfully.
That is a good point.
You do not need to, you need to make money in a heartless system where there's no social supports if you don't have a pension or a mate to support you or any money in the bank. But for example, most elder care is done by older people looking in on other older people for free. You telling me that doesn't have value? It has billions of dollars in economic value, and think of the human value. But we live in a society that is, very, very capitalist and profit driven and unkind to people who are older or who are disabled.
Yeah.
Ungenerous for sure.
Ungenerous for sure. And so I guess you started out that way and then you drifted just more in towards ageism, discovered. Okay.
Yeah, I had a blog, remember blogs? And it
Yes.
had a word cloud. Remember word
God,
clouds?
yes.
And
I
yes.
forgot about
And ageism was there. And I am politically inclined. I mean, my first serious book was called Cutting Loose: Why Women Who End Their Marriages Do So Well.
Yes, I saw
And the
that.
catalyst for that was learning very early on that 2/3 of divorces were initiated by women.
Usually after menopause, right?
I
Was
don't
it
know.
not? Because I've been finding that, but just I
Well,
guess
I was startled. I thought it was 98% guys dumping their,
oh no.
sad, old wives like me, and I was 40 at the time, for fertile trophy versions. And I thought it was the same. I realized everything in hindsight.
Of course.
That I wanted to investigate why I was so afraid of getting divorced. Just as 20 years later, I wanted to investigate why I was so apprehensive about getting older. And the reason for the first one is because we live in a sexist, patriarchal, capitalist culture. And the reason, and add aging to that, an ageist, sexist, patriarchal culture. And it is these forces. If we zoom out and think, where are the negative messages come from? They're coming from the beauty industry. Because if you look at your face and you say, I see I have some crow feet, and don't run out and buy a $350 magic crow feet Be Gone cream, they would go out of business.
Right. You're absolutely right. I just had this conversation with my friend. She came on the podcast because she got some cosmetic procedures done, and I was just shocked.
No judgment.
I was shocked that she did that because I've been friends with her for over 20 years and I never thought anything bothered her. And she's like, oh yeah, next week I'm getting this done. And I was like, you are? And I was like, okay. And so I wanted to talk to her about why. And also, I feel that pressure too. Well,
of course you do.
I mean, of course I do.
You're a human in the world. You're a woman in the world.
Yes. And
do you not watch TV or ever open a magazine or ever look at, I mean, I weep now at, and I want to be really clear. I weep. I was going to finish, Nicole Kidman, her face is now frozen. Even Kate Blanchett, I just love her. And I really now avoid movies with her in it because that beautiful mouth is now sort of mask-like. That I cannot, you feel pressure. I feel pressure. Your friends feels pressure. Imagine the
Oh,
pressures
God.
on female movie stars. I don't judge them and I don't judge your friend.
Yes.
I mean,
No,
I've had
at all.
women say to me, I need Botox to feel confident about myself. More power to you. But until we in power slowly, slowly, slowly challenge the messages and the structures that, tell us to cut up our faces. And of course, the problem with that is, one of these days, you cannot stay young.
Right. Yes, that is true. You cannot stay young. That is unless you're dead. So,
No, you can stay fit,
yeah.
even, or maybe not, you can break your leg and not, I mean, and we know that the more attached, we know from social media and studies about blah, 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 that the more, it literally are studies that show that the more often you look at your phone and the more often you look at yourself, the less happy you are.
Yes, exactly. And then when we were talking about all this stuff, I said, my phone's just on silent. It's not off. So tomorrow I'm going to be getting all these things on Instagram about now I'll be getting crow's feet be gone in my Instagram feed and all these things.
I'm going to trademark that, by the way. Don't even think
Yeah,
about it.
exactly. Well, I want to ask you, I'm sure everybody asks you about this. I apologize, but you came into my consciousness. I found out about you when I saw you on the CBS Sunday morning show with Jane
Mm.
Fonda. And this is an ageist thing because my husband always calls it my old lady show because I love to get up on Sunday and watch it. And I guess I only started doing this like 5-10 years ago. And he's like, are you watching your,
Uh-oh. You better cut that out.
but I love that show. And so you were on with CBS Sunday morning, and you guys can watch. You probably already have seen this, but if you haven't,
It's on
watch.
my website.
Yeah, on your
If you go to
website,
my website is thischairrocks.com and it's there under
it
video
is,
appearances.
and it's you and Jane Fonda talking about. And this is kind of the same thing we talked about with Dr. Ellen Langer was that you can add 7 years. You tell me I'm going to screw it up.
Yeah, I mean, it was a PSA about the value of community, in particular of art classes, because it's a great way to have community and find creative expression. And it said, add 7.5 years to your life. I would never put it that way because there are no guarantees in life. You could live off nothing but kale from now and die of a heart attack tomorrow,
Sure.
right? No one can promise
Right.
that. But there's a wonderful scientist named Becca Levy, whose research this is based, that she's done almost all not all, I mean, there's more and more research showing that attitudes towards aging affect how our minds and bodies function.
Yes.
And people with what she calls a more positive attitude towards aging live an average of 7.5 years longer in this study that she did. And they walk faster, they heal quicker, they recover, more likely to recover from a severe, disease or accident or some sort. I like to say people with a more accurate understanding of aging or a fact rather than fear-based, because I don't want it to sound like happy talk. A lot of people sort of go, oh, getting old isn't so bad. You just have to, exercise every day. And that's the successful aging thing. Keep working really hard and spending lots of money
Mm-hmm.
to try to keep looking and moving like a younger version of yourself. And that's a trap too, because shit is going to change.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry, can I
You
say
could
shit on
say
your podcast?
fuck. I don't care. You could say whatever you want.
Um, but so, and so it was a hilarious PSA, and it did, I think, a really good job, which it was all in the editing, of saying, your attitude towards aging, people with a more positive, accurate, because certainly most people are scared shitless, so more positive, we'll take it, attitude, are less likely to get Alzheimer's,
Yes,
even if they have the gene
yes.
that links to the disease. Because, and the idea that the scientist thinking is that more positive attitude operates as a buffer against stress, and we know stress kills us, right?
Yes.
If you can't find your car keys and you have that, and no judgment, but that what is that, what if this is the first sign
Right.
of dementia, of serious cognitive loss, that gasp, that spike in your, is it cortisol,
Could be.
or
Yeah, I
something,
think so.
spike in anxiety spike, is bad for you. If you go, I mean, I I took my Apple phone in because I wanted to know how to change which credit card came up when I did the pay. And the woman greeted me at the door. There was a store. The store was empty. And she said, well, have you tried? I said, no, I walked in the Apple store and asked the first person I came to. And she was in her 20s, definitely. She fiddled with it for a minute. She said, oh, I just did this the other day. I wish I could remember how.
Right. That's not
Right.
a senior moment.
That's not a senior moment. That's not a junior moment. We forget things. Right. And the odds that it is another fact, rates of dementia are dropping.
That's
Look it
fascinating.
up. Google dementia rates dropping.
Why is that?
We never hear, well, I just had a scientist here for lunch with a scientist from Australia. I said, we don't know why. She said, yeah, we do. They're dropping in the West because of lower smoking rates and better cure of for heart disease and better treatment for diabetes.
Oh.
And all those things impede circulation. And lack of circulation is, they think, the main contributor to those plaques and tangles.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
we do know. And people are being diagnosed at later ages. It's a horrible disease. If you're terrified of it, I don't blame
Of
you.
course.
But if you can't find, as the saying goes, if you can't find your car keys, you just left them somewhere. I mean, I lose my phone at least 6 times a day and feel like an idiot.
Right.
But if you forget what your car keys are for,
Yes, that's different.
that's a sign of a real problem. But the reason you're looking for your car keys is so you can get in your damn car and drive away. I'm just guessing.
Yes. Yeah. And you said this kind of the same thing in your TED talk that I guess you had a knee replacement or a bad knee and you were inclined to say, oh, it's because I'm old, but then you were like, but I have another perfectly good knee. And that one, I'm not saying, well, it's perfect because I'm
Right.
young
I mean, anytime a doctor says, at your age,
Mhm.
which is sort of what the doctor was doing with
Yes.
you with the
Yes.
clipboard, it is time to find a new doctor.
Absolutely.
And if you and another good question, if it's a new doctor or you getting a second opinion or wondering if you should say, is this a treatment you would recommend for someone younger?
Mm. Oh, that's smart. I like that.
Yeah.
That's very
And
good.
sometimes age is a real thing. There are reasons that younger bodies may need different treatment than older bodies, but broadly, and your level of, but it is your level of overall health that is the best factor in figuring out whether you should have CPR or an organ transplant.
Right.
But that's not, there are 18-year-olds who are not good candidates, and there are 80-year-olds who are.
Yes.
There are more 18-year-olds who are a good candidate, but no 80-year-old should be ruled out simply because of their age.
Yes, that's such a good point. But I want to get back to the PSA for a second because we kind of glossed over it. So you were saying like art classes were an example just because it's a community, but is that like just such a big factor, just having community and
I love that
surrounding
question.
you about people?
If you had asked me again, I came into this knowing nothing, no degrees, no professional affiliations, nothing. And what was the best, most important component of a good old age? I would have said health. That's not it. And then I would have said, well, wealth, because you could buy health or, whatever. The most important component of a good old age is having a strong social network.
Hmm.
Relationships are what give life meaning. And that is another reason, I should say, to have younger friends of all ages, because it is devastating to outlive your friends, your family. It's hard. Men, I think this is changing as gender roles get more mixy-uppy, but certainly The Office was the major source of friendship for a lot of men. And if you leave the office, you don't have, women tend to be the maintainer of the family social network and have more friends and talk to each other more. And it is those networks that give life meaning and that support us through life. And it is, of course, also in supporting others that we find enormous meaning. These are two-way transactions.
Oh, that's good. And so if people just don't generally, I guess that's why you recommended the art class. If you don't generally have, you look around and you're older and you don't have that support or that community to do something like an art class
My
or
advice is you can't just grab a young person and say, hi, let's be
right.
friends. But think of something you like to do and find a mixed age group to do it with. And if you are organizing a meeting, a group, a party, invite some people who are different from you in age. Just like ideally invite some people who don't share your sexual orientation. Invite some people who don't have the same skin color. It's awkward. It is slow. you need to be deliberate about it. And I used to be one of the, I mean, I used to be a lot of things. I used to think, oh, it's no problem. It's easy because my friend cohort is very age diverse, but I've been working on it for a long
Yeah.
time. And I'm lucky. I'm close with my daughter who just turned 40, and all her friends are freaking out about turning 40. So they're all like saying, Ashton, what do I do? But it's still pretty goddamn white. It's
Yeah.
less white than it used to be because I am working on that.
Yeah.
But we can, and another thing, if you're at a party or a meeting, break a habit. It's a habit. We all have it, of making a beeline for people our own age.
Mm.
Break that habit. You may, I mean, I think because I'm assuming, if it's an older person, they think, oh, those young people won't want to talk to me, or I won't have anything in common with them. It's conceivable that those younger people are jerks who really don't want an old person to come and talk to them. But that's because they're jerks, not because they're
Yes.
young, right?
Yes.
You're much more likely to find a connection with one of them.
Yeah, that's such good advice. I recently found myself with all these new friends. Just a lot of them I met through the podcast. I live in Austin, Texas, and I interviewed these musicians, and then they introduced me to these other people, and so I just had all these new friends all of a sudden. I was like, you know what I'm
Right.
going to do? I'm going to do a good old fashioned potluck at my house so that all these new friends could come, and it was all people of different ages, and it was
Nice.
so everybody
Feels
was
so
like,
nice,
this
doesn't it?
was the best. Like, when are you doing it again?
People are hungry for it.
It was,
And
that's
we
what they
know
said. We
that
were hungry for this.
it's true. And there's a ton of initiatives now around intergenerational connection, which I prefer calling like age mixed.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll take it because when we mix it up in any way, it's very hard to hold on to your stereotypes. And also, there's just all sorts of intuitive ways that coming together across age gaps is fulfilling. And it's not necessarily, the stereotype that old people have all this wisdom to pass down to ignorant young people is a total stereotype, can be benevolent as well.
Yeah.
And some older people are wise, but lots of older people are idiots, right? And
Yes.
we have a lot to learn from young people too. It
That's
really
right.
depends on who you are and what you're interested in and what your values are, not age. It's ironic. We're so scared of this age thing. And I want a world where we're less scared of it and more willing to name it and claim it,
Mm.
but where we demote it, where we take it off its pedestal and acknowledge that it really is not anywhere near as important a characteristic as an ageist culture would have us believe.
Yeah. I've loved our conversation. You are so smart, so, opened my eyes to a lot. And I loved this book, that This Chair Rocks, A Manifesto Against Ageism. It really did open my eyes. I was like, shit, is this whole podcast ageist? But no, I was, I'm just,
It's that the minute you can't start too slow on this, Lauren. I love that, because the minute you ask yourself that question, you are doing the hardest thing of all. And your uncertainty or curiosity or self-interrogation, you are bringing that into every room you go into. And that is how we change the culture.
you're very gentle and generous and gracious
But that's
about that. I
true.
appreciate
It's
that.
not like some watered down thing I came up with to make you feel good.
Thank
It's
you.
true.
Thank you.
Culture change is slow and incremental.
Mm. Okay, everybody, think about what you're saying in your language, and check out Ashton Applewhite if you have not already. Thank you, Ashton, for being with us.
My pleasure,
All
Lauren.
right, take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening, friend. From my heart to yours, be well until we meet again.